I'm from the United States. I'm from a Jewish family. I was raised Jewish. I have seen friends, colleagues, people I've known. I've heard so many stories as an activist against circumcision in the United States, where it's very common. Stories of lifelong pain, lifelong depression, suicide, lifelong loss of sexual function due to circumcision that they did not consent to as a child. I believe that forced body modifications are for consenting adults only.
They say it's harmless, but they say a clitoral nick is harmful, but invasive surgery is not. How can that be? It can't be. The truth is, as discussed, it harms all boys and men. They're restrained. It's invasive surgery. It's painful, amputates a body part, reduces the size of the penis, radically changes its appearance, leaves a scar, impairs men's sex lives, and possibly causes psychological harm. It's a fraud.
I don't have any of the complications I mentioned, like extremely tight skin or bleeding, but I know I've met people with these problems, many people with these problems, and they never understood why. People do not attribute the problems they have to circumcision, because when they're a child and they're circumcised as an infant, a lot of the complications they do not know are caused by circumcision. They just think this is normal, how my body is. I do have painful urination sometimes because of meatal stenosis, which occurs very commonly when you circumcise infants. Now this is just seen as normal because it's, the urethra shrinks when you circumcise someone as an infant. The urethral opening gets smaller. It's called meatal stenosis. And normally it's not treated because they still can urinate, but they never attribute this, that this is a problem or this is not abnormal.
So the defense of male circumcision, even among religious people, is that there's some health benefits, right? But this is not really true. There's a hypothetical, potential, and rare benefit that might occur. It is not a universal benefit. So if you have cancer and we cut out the cancer, there's an immediate benefit. But if you have a circumcision, it's only hypothetical and speculative that you'll ever receive any benefit from having been circumcised. So it's important to note that. And in medicine, that's really not how we practice medicine on any other part of the body. We don't go cutting things off thinking that there could be potentially a medical benefit. We wait until there is a problem and then we address it. Because as you mentioned, surgery is always painful, it's risky, there's scarring, there's deformity. That is all true with male circumcision.
I'm not going to argue with the fact that it is a lesion that's made in the skin. That is the reality of it, yes. I never ever bought into what we were taught, that there was a health benefit to this. I felt that was the kind of argument by certain groups that felt that eating kosher was healthy, that circumcision was healthy, that ritual bathing was healthy, separation of men and women during the cycle was healthy. I felt this was all apologetics. I never bought into that. It is what it is.
This is an example of medicine borrowing from religion, understanding that the procedure, any procedure that was requested or in fact required by God must have not only spiritual benefits but health benefits as well.
Beneficial medically? No.
So you don't feel that there's any medical benefit to the procedure?
Not as long as families can keep the area clean. I don't see how there's value to it from a health standpoint.
As long as a young man can be taught to clean the foreskin, then there's no reason why cleanliness in that area has to be any less important than cleanliness in any other area of the body.
This is one of the myths. See, one of the myths is not true. It's a lie. These are one of the lies we're told about circumcision. It's going to prevent cancer. It's going to prevent venereal disease. It's going to make cleanliness easier. Not true. In 1955, a Columbia University obstetrician made the point, and correctly so, that smegma, which is the material produced under the foreskin, is produced in all mammals, the horse in copious quantities. Can you imagine what would happen if somebody called for the routine circumcision of baby horses?
In the past, often phimosis was diagnosed, the failure of the foreskin to retract, and physicians may have believed that at some time, but at some point physicians learned that it may take until puberty to retract. So that's a false claim, and it's still used today.
The best message that we could give to parents and doctors, nurses, anybody that takes care of babies, babysitters, is leave the foreskin alone. Don't retract it, don't cut it, don't damage it, don't do anything to it.
And they're still talking about penile cancer, and the AAP says it may prevent it in 1 in 909 men. But this is misleading and intended to frighten. It's one of the rarest diseases in the Western world. There's no epidemiological proof that it reduces the risk of penile cancer. Boys are not at risk of penile cancer, and it's easy to prevent by good hygiene and not smoking. The American Cancer Society says it's improper to make this claim. The AMA called this claim unjustified in 1999. Physicians would not remove breast buds if it were legal to prevent breast cancer, which is many times more common than penile cancer.
The first claim that really became popular, I think, was that this would discourage boys from masturbating. After a point, it became increasingly obvious that treatment in and of itself, curing, was not really going to work, that these claims were spurious. But as that happened, they shifted ground and began to make claims instead for prevention instead of treatment. First, that circumcision would prevent cancer of the penis. Then it became cancer of the prostate. Then it became cancer of the cervix. So each time as a particular kind of illness became important, circumcision was advanced as the preventive for it. When one claim was discredited, the next one appeared. And of course, we're still dealing with that now, with urinary tract infections, the latest favorite claim, along, of course, with the most popular of all, HIV/AIDS, the claim that this will save the world from HIV/AIDS, circumcising men and babies.
There clearly is not any evidence in the modern U.S. data about the likelihood of catching an STD being prevented by being circumcised. If you think about the situation in San Francisco among gay white men in the 80s, I would estimate certainly on the order of 75 to 80% of them were circumcised, and half of the gay men in San Francisco contracted HIV for a period of time. So if there is any prophylaxis, it's sure as hell not much of one.
Physicians claim actual benefits where none exist. It's like a vaccine. It reduces HIV by 60%. Well, that's highly misleading. The absolute risk reduction is 1.3%. It applies to African men who would only benefit for a short time, and the AAP concedes that the numbers don't apply to infants in the United States.
In the early part of the 20th century and the last decades of the 19th century, physicians were looking for cures. Germ theory of disease didn't come about until about 1895. We didn't know what caused diseases. Somebody came along with an idea, everybody listened to him. The most prolific writer on circumcision health benefits was a doctor named Peter Charles Remondino. He said, this procedure will prevent or cure about 100 ailments. Asthma, epilepsy, gout, rectal prolapse, feeble-mindedness, insanity. You name the disease, it was prevented or cured by circumcision. Now, I ignore this book. It's of no importance to me. Why? It was written in 1891. What is important is that this book was reprinted word for word in 1974. And in 1974, and even now, you will find this book used as medical reference in American medical journals. This, to me, is a disgrace.
The AAP says specific benefits identified include prevention of UTIs, cancer, and some STDs, including HIV. Then this was publicized widely. It's on the front page of the New York Times. That circumcision has many health benefits. This is a fraud on boys, parents, Medicaid officials, and the government. It's knowingly false. The AAP itself concedes that there's a remote chance of benefiting any child. They instruct physicians what to tell parents. They even have talking points, which are actually selling points, how to handle objections from parents. Physicians use high-pressure sales tactics. They solicit the parents of all newborns. And American parents make easy targets. They don't know anything about circumcision. They trust the doctors, and they're culturally biased themselves, and the men usually have foreskins. They're surprised. They have to decide on the spot in maybe 2 minutes. You wouldn't buy a car in 2 minutes. The mothers are quote, out of it, exhausted hormonal drug, so they can't think straight. And then the fathers want the sons to look like them. And then if the parents say no, physicians often badger them. Then this is a fraud. These tactics would not be allowed elsewhere. If you bought a vacuum cleaner in Massachusetts, you'd have 3 days to say, I don't want it. But if you say yes to circumcision, you can't revoke the decision.